Hey guys, it's Ben here, also known as Gadget. I just wanted to jump on here, shoot a quick video. I'm going to share with you today 11 ways to die on the PCT. Now I share this video with you not to scare anyone or to do any fear mongering, but I just wanted to let you know all of the risks that are out there in the wilderness of the Pacific West Coast. And even more than that, I wanted to share with you what I will be doing in order to protect myself from any of the hazards that may be there. And so when you think of wilderness, it's easy for us to get into our minds that everything is safe and everything is okay. And although the PCT is pretty safe, it is the wilderness, and there are dangers. As I stated, there are hazards, no matter what wilderness you may be wandering around in. And so I'm going to go through the top 11, what I call the top 11 ways to die, or you could say the top 11 risks, things to look out for on the Pacific Crest Trail. The number one is probably as you start out at Campo and you work your way northbound, which is the direction I'll be going, through the desert. One thing you want to keep in mind is dehydration and what can ultimately lead to a heat stroke. And so you want to watch out for the heat. And so what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be starting my Pacific Crest Trail through hike early. In hopes to get through most of the desert, if not all of the desert, before it gets too hot, before the high temperatures of the summer hit. And so there are going to be long water carries along that route. And so I have the capability to carry up to 7 liters of water if I need to. I know there may be 20, 30-mile stretches where I will not have a water source. So I'm going to be cameling up, drinking as much water as I can, and then filling up my containers and hiking out as far as I can until I get to the next water source. And so it's hard to understand and know what each day, especially early on, is going to be. But I have a lot of pieces of gear to kind of help me combat against the hot temperatures, against the sun. First, I have my sun umbrella. I have some sun gloves. I have sunblock just to try to guard my skin to keep me from getting sunburnt. And then just being mindful of, how much sun I'm taking in. There may be some days where I have to start super early to be able to do some hiking before the heat of the day rises. And then I may have to just hang out on the side of the trail in the shade somewhere, just taking a siesta, you could say, until that evening, and maybe push a few miles in the evening when it's a little cooler. Number two is along the same grounds, but on the other end of the spectrum, and that is hypothermia and cold exposure. And so because I'm starting early, it's going to be cooler temperatures. And so when I reach the high Sierras, it's going to be earlier in the season, so there may be a lot of snow there in the Sierras. It may be a lot of wind there in the Sierras. And so I have to be mindful of that and just make sure that I have enough layers, make sure I'm moving, make sure I'm not wet, where it may cause me to get unbearably cold, I should say. And so my only combat against the cold is just to wear layers. I have plenty of layers. I have a base layer, I have a mid layer, and I even have my raincoat and my puffy where I can wear over. And so if I have to put on all my layers, I'll put on my layers. But I also want to be careful that I'm not making myself so warm that I begin to sweat. Because once you begin to sweat, then that water from the liquid, the sweat, can cause you to be cold, especially when the wind hits it. So I have to be careful at that as well. So number three is altitude sickness. Now this is something that I experienced just a little bit on my river, or it was my Ray Lakes Loop hike I did back in 2022. I was in the Sierras. I was Hiking up, I was camping next to Ray Lakes, which is about 10,000 feet, above 10,000 feet. The next day, I was planning on summiting over Glen Pass, but well, I did, but before that, I laid there in my tent and I realized that I was getting a headache. Now, the headache was caused from altitude. I'm a lowlander, meaning I grew up in southern Illinois, so we do not have mountains in Illinois, at least not high mountains such as the Sierras. And so I wasn't used to that. And so basically what I did then is what I plan on doing now, is just taking my time, not pushing myself too much, especially right at the beginning, allowing my body to acclimate. I stayed 2 days there at Ray Lakes, and basically allowed my body to acclimate, allow my body to become accustomed to the altitude. And then the next day, I popped over the gap, and I was doing fine. Now, I did do some huffing and puffing and gasping for air as I was climbing the mountain, but it was no problem at all. And so again, I plan on just taking my time, watching my symptoms, make sure I don't get nauseated, make sure I don't lose my hunger, and at any time, if I feel like the symptoms are beginning to rise and it becomes a point where it's unsafe, I will have an exit plan. I will get out of the mountains. I will go into town, and I will rest there for a little bit and then try again later. And so the next thing you got to watch out for on my list is fire and smoke. Now, unfortunately, the West Coast is known for its wildfires, especially later in the season. In reality, they now have a fire season, which is just mind-blowing to me that there's a season. So this is usually late summer, early fall, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But is when you begin to see fires break out. And this oftentimes happens in Northern California and Oregon and Washington until the winter comes and snow falls. And so I'm going to just be aware. I have an app on my phone. It will alert me of trail closures. So if there's a situation and there's a fire ahead, if I don't see the smoke, or even if I do see the smoke, the app will tell me if the route is safe or not. The app is by the Pacific Crest Trail Association, and so I will be using that app to help guide me along the trail to watch out for these fire closures. Because not only is it the fire you have to watch out for, but even the smoke. When I was on the Appalachian Trail back in 2023, there were northern fires in Canada. And even though I was far away from the fires, there were some days when I was in New Hampshire that I could still see the smoke, the haze in the air from the fires up in Canada. And so you have to watch out for that. If it becomes too much, you want to make sure you get off trail, because you don't want to inhale all of that smoke, and that could cause issues as well. Number 5, drowning. Now, on the Pacific Crest Trail, there are some areas, especially in the Sierra Mountains, where I may have to do a river crossing, or I may have to do a stream crossing of one type or another. And they can be dangerous. I remember back in 22, hiking in the Sierras and trying to cross this river where the bridge had been washed away. And I remember standing on the log, trying to walk across this log, and it was very sketchy. It was not safe. I ended up having to turn around and find another way across the river. And so my plan here is to just play each crossing by ear or by eye, however you want to say it. And when I get there, just to assess the situation, if I feel it's too dangerous to cross, I won't cross. I will wait, or I will walk up and try to find another place where it's a little bit safer, maybe a log or a snow bridge or something like that, where I can cross over and be safe. I also want to make sure that I'm with another person, and so I do not wish to make any river crossings alone. Back in 23, there was a man by the name of Steady Eddie who tried to cross a river crossing after a big storm in the state of New Hampshire, and he ended up getting washed away. Actually, I believe it was the state of Vermont, but he ended up getting washed away, and he had no one there, and so no one knew, and no one could help him. So I want to make sure that I'm with other people, and then if the river is too rough, I'll wait. And so oftentimes rivers are rougher in the afternoons or later in the day when the sun has been melting the snow, and so I may have to wait, set up camp on one side of the river, wake up early in the morning when the snow is still frozen, and then try then. Maybe the river is not as rough at that time, at that point. Number 6, and this I believe is probably one of the number one hazards that people face in the wilderness, especially a wilderness such as the Pacific Crest Trail, is falling. There are many areas along the trail where you are high up, and you may be traveling along a steep incline, a steep cliff, and if you're not careful, if you're not watching your step, you may slip and you may fall down the mountain. And so I want to make sure I'm doing that. I'm watching my feet, I'm watching my step, I'm being careful. I'm using my trekking poles to help me keep my balance, as well as using my ice axe just in case I slip and start to fall down the mountain. In the Sierras, there's going to be snow, and so I want to arrest. I want to make sure I have something to be able to stop myself from sliding, because once you get sliding, it's hard to stop. And so I want to make sure I have the right pieces of equipment. I will have micro spikes on my shoes when I'm in snow and ice to be able to have a better grip on the surface, and just being aware. Probably number one thing to do for safety in any of these is just to be aware. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of where you're standing. Be aware of what's going on in the moment. Not become so distracted that you don't see that rock in front of you and you trip or whatever. Number 7. So number 7 is avalanches. And this could be both snow or rock. I remember back in 22, it was my last night on trail. I was in the Sierra Mountains. I was camping. I was laying in my tent. I just laid down, and all of a sudden I hear this big crack. I mean, it was loud. I did not know what it was. And so I looked outside thinking maybe it's thunder, maybe there was a lightning strike, but the skies were clear. There was no cloud anywhere to be seen. Well, the next day as I was hiking, I was talking to a couple I met on trail, and they began to talk about this avalanche that took place the previous evening. And so that sound I heard was a huge boulder that had broken off and had rolled down the mountain. And I guess the crack was the sound of the stones, of the rocks hitting one another. And so I have to be careful of just, again, being aware of my surroundings, looking around. It's hard to I would even change it, not hard, but it's impossible to outrun an avalanche. However, you can be aware of the signs. You can look around if you see signs of freshly fallen rocks and stuff. Just look up. Just be careful. Especially in the Sierras, you not only have the rocks, you have the snow. And so know the signs. Know what to look for. Know what are the dangers, or where you need to be careful, where you need to go around. Is there loose snow on the side of the mountain? What's going on? And so all of that you have to watch out for. And again, make sure you have the right equipment. Number 8. Number 8 is widowmakers. Now, widowmakers are something that I've had experience with. Not only have I experienced widowmakers falling, thankfully not on my head, but I met a guy on the Appalachian Trail. It was quite early on my thru-hike, who went by the trail name of Lucky. Now, they called him Lucky because one night he was camping at a shelter, but he was in his tent, and a storm came through, and the tree right next to his tent fell over and landed on his tent. Now, thankfully, he was not in his tent. He was hanging out in the shelter with some other thru-hikers, and his life was spared. And so, basically, what you have to do when you get to camp and you set up your tent anywhere you want to, before you set up your tent, you want to look up. You want to look around. You want to see if there's any dead limbs or dead trees or anything that may fall, especially if there's strong wind that comes through during the night. And so these are called widowmakers, and we want to make sure we stay clear of all of them. Number 9, lightning. Now, this is another aspect or another thing that I have quite a bit of experience on the Appalachian Trail. It rained, it stormed a lot. Some of my most fearful moments was being on top of a mountain hiking as a storm rolled in and lightning began to crash all around. And so anytime a storm comes in or you see lightning or hear thunder, you want to get down. You want to get low. You don't want to be on top of a mountain. You want to try to be down as low as you can go, as low as you can get, and just stay clear. Wait till it passes. Once it passes, then you can go over the mountain. Do not try to do it during a storm. It is not safe for anyone. Number 10, wildlife. Now, some of the wildlife you have to watch out for on the Pacific Crest Trail are bears, mountain lions, and rattlesnakes. Now, most of these animals don't want to have anything to do with a hiker. They want to get as far away from people as they can. People are more of a danger to them than they are to us. And so bears, you just want to be cautious of your food. Bears don't want, like I said, they don't want anything to do with you. They want your food. And so you want to make sure that you're hanging your bear bag, or you're carrying your bear can, or you're doing what you need to do in the proper area to be able to protect not your food from the bears, but to protect the bears from your food. Because the saying goes, a fed bear is a dead bear. And so once a bear gets a hold of your food, then they begin to associate people with food. And they turn into what is known as a problematic bear. Now, a problematic bear begins to harass people, begins to come around, and becomes ultimately a dangerous bear. And unfortunately, on these occasions, on these situations, these bears have to be euthanized. And so nobody wants a dead bear. I don't want a dead bear. I love bears. And so I'm going to protect the bear by protecting my food. Mountain lions, they're around. They probably know you're there before you know they are there. And so just being aware, making yourself big if you feel threatened or if you feel encountered, using your trekking poles, and this goes to say the same thing with the bears as well, is using your trekking poles to try to block if you can. Just whatever you can, fight. You want to fight with all your might if you get attacked. But the chances of being attacked by a mountain lion or by a bear is very, very, very slim. And so don't let that worry you about hiking in the Sierras. I know I'm not worried whatsoever. Another hazard, as I stated, was rattlesnakes. Rattlesnakes are all over the place. Just a few months ago, I was in southern Illinois. I was hiking on a trail. It was fall. Leaves were covering the trail, were covering the ground, and I'm just hiking along, enjoying myself, enjoying the weather. I looked down, and probably 3 feet in front of me was this huge rattlesnake, timber rattler, just curled up, lying right on the trail. And so if I was not watching, if I was not looking where I was going, I would have stepped right on him. And so the same thing is true in the Pacific Crest Trail. On the Pacific Crest Trail, you have to be aware. You have to watch where you're going. You have to listen. Some people like to listen to headphones as they're hiking. I'm not one of those. I like to hear nature. I want to be involved in my surroundings. I want to be aware of my surroundings. And if I hear a rattle, I'm going to stop. I'm going to assess. I'm going to find out where that is coming from, and I'm going to get far away as quick as I can. And so that's my plan with rattlesnakes. And number 11, the last 11 ways to die, the last hazard that I'll give you is dangerous people. Now, this is probably the number one of what I would say most questions I get that people are concerned. They want to know if I'm carrying a firearm, if I'm going to carry, one of those big Crocodile Dundee knives, or how am I going to protect myself. And most people on the trail are awesome. They're friendly. They're not dangerous whatsoever. However, I will not say it is impossible or that you may never run into somebody who could be a danger to you. But the chances are very slim, very slim. I tell people all the time, your chances of being hurt by another person is greater just walking down the sidewalk in, whatever town versus walking along a trail in the middle of the wilderness. And so, again, just be aware, know who's around you, not just what's around you. If you feel uncomfortable, if your spidey senses begin to kick in, just try to get yourself out of the situation. Get as far from the person as possible, because there have been situations where people have become a danger. But just be aware and be ready to, like the wildlife, be ready to fight. If you feel if you're attacked, do whatever you can to get yourself out of the situation. And that may not be just physically, but even mentally. Try to be smart. Be aware. Don't be so mixed up in the moment where you don't know what to do. You want to try to remain calm and to be able to act appropriately. So thank you for tuning into this video. This is a different video than I've ever done before, but I wanted to share with you the 11 ways to die on the Pacific Crest Trail. If this was interesting to you, go ahead and like, and you can follow me for more content. I'll be starting my Pacific Crest Trail through hike just in a couple weeks. Actually, in a week, or just a little over a week. And so I'm looking forward to that. And I look forward to having you follow along as well as I begin to experience the West Coast in this new adventure. So with that said, I will talk to you again soon from the trail.